Hi, this is Michael Waits, and welcome back to the Asia Tech Podcast. We are joined today by Ryan Manafe, a co-founder and the CEO of Dagangan. I hope I got that one right, too. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on the show. Before we jump into the main part of our conversation, let's give our listeners a little bit of your background for some context, yeah?
Sure. Thank you, Michael, for having me, and congratulations for pronouncing Dagangan precisely right.
Thank you.
My name is Ryan Manafe. I'm the CEO co-founder of Dagangan, as you mentioned. I built Dagangan since 5 years ago from a city called Magelang. It's a tier 3 cities. It's located very far from the capital city of the province, which is Central Java. And you need to take a flight from Jakarta, which is our country's capital city, and to fly to Yogyakarta and take another land transportations by car for 3 hours to that city, which is Magelang.
Oh, wow.
Where we started.
Go ahead.
The reason why we started in Magelang, because I spent 3 years of my senior high school in Magelang. It was a semi-military senior high school because my previous aspiration is to be an army. Before Dagangan, I built a renewable energy company called Sun. And then beforehand, I used to be a consultant in McKinsey. Basically, Dagangan is my alternative way to do something for the countries because I end up not becoming an army.
What is the exact problem that you're trying to solve with Dagangan? Is there... Look, we know that Indonesia is the biggest country in Southeast Asia, 270 million people, 18,000 islands. A lot of the population ends up being remote. And did you learn when you were in high school, maybe at this sort of semi-military school, that just the access to products wasn't there for people? Is that part of this?
Well, I was originally from Jakarta. I was born in Jakarta, raised in this big metropolitan city. So, but then it was tough junior high school time because I was a fat boy and everyone was bullying me. So when I look at this semi-military high school, I was so high-spirited and I feel like I want to do that. But when I end up entering the school, I look at totally different world. Like, this is not Indonesia I knew when I was raised in Jakarta. And suddenly mix up with the passion to serve for the countries, and part of the education was actually doing a lot of field trips to the villages nearby the schools. Then I could see the realities, which is lived by 80% of the population. In fact, 80% of the population are not living in Jakarta, and they live in these villages where they have difficulties to access the affordable daily necessities, where they have to travel at least 20 kilometers to the nearby cities to get their daily needs or staple foods, happening every single day. So
this is not even just like getting luxury goods or special things. It's just like getting daily necessities. You're talking about like toilet paper, toothbrushes, soap, and stuff like that, where there's got to be a long distance travel to just be able to go pick that stuff up. Yeah, where for me, I live in Bangkok, even in Jakarta, I literally walk 700 meters away from my house, and there are 3 supermarkets, right?
There is no supermarkets in this rural areas. There is a couple of micro stores deep inside the villages. So the pain is actually experienced by these micro stores because they have to get the supplies from the nearby city centers. And not even toilet papers. We're talking about rice, sugars, ready-to-eat snacks, and then simple, basic coffee and tea, actually.
That's amazing. And you talk about warung, yeah?
Warung. Warung in Philippines, you call them sari-sari. In India, you call them kiran.
Yeah, got it. Okay, I just want to make sure that I understand this. So if you have 87% or over 80% of the population living in places where they don't have access to goods, but what percentage of the spending in the country is coming from those places, right? We have this idea, I think, for big city people that the cities are the places that drive it. And I also think we have this feeling that the large corporations do most of the economic behavior in countries. But like my research tells me that something like 70 to 80% of revenue in countries or the economic activity is SMEs. Is that also true in Indonesia?
I think that's correct. So even you're mentioning about SMEs, which is driving the 70% of the revenue of the country, and most of them are located outside the cities. But even if you're talking about the 30% revenue driven by the big companies, if you look closer to these big companies, their markets are actually people living in the rural areas. So it's beyond the 70%. Uh, for example, the big companies, the one that produce instant noodles in the food, and the instant noodles is very popular. It's called Indomie. It's even exported to Africa, and African people start thinking, "Oh, this is originally coming from Africa." There are big companies. They're located in Jakarta. They're publicly listed. They even have an investment arm in Hong Kong called First Pacific, but their markets are actually in the rural areas because they're selling cheap instant noodles. So it's massive. In fact, a lot of tycoons, a lot of family businesses are starting from doing distributions or selling products to the rural areas for the middle low income.
Got it. So what does Dagangan do to try to solve this problem? Like, what was the original idea and what's the current idea, if that makes sense?
We were talking about Indofood, which is the biggest brands, the biggest products. And now almost everyone in the rural areas know Indofood. In fact, the only brand they're using right now is probably Indofood. But, it's kind of not fair when more and more companies are coming in from other countries like Unilever and Coca-Cola, or probably the newer companies in Indonesia, for example, say Garuda Food or Auka. They also have a very good products with a better value proposition with a very competitive price, but they cannot reach this rural people. And it's also kind of not fair for the rural people because they don't have access towards this better and cheaper products. So what we're trying to do is not only basically giving the rural people convenience by doesn't have to travel to the nearby cities, but also providing access towards these brands to really distribute their products to the rural areas. And if you're talking about distributions, it's really not simple. You used to live in Japan. You can travel from Tokyo to Osaka, which is 543 kilometers. I did a couple of research about it, only within 2 hours using the Shinkansen, which is high-speed trains. Now, for the same exact distance in Java Island. Java Island is the most populated island, the most advanced island. From Jakarta to Blora, the same exact distance, 543 kilometers, you need at least 10 hours by car.
Oh my God, really?
Bumpy roads, things are not connected. So that's the reason why if you don't build super comprehensive and deep distribution channel, it's going to be tough to compete with this big brands that already did it since like 50, 60 years ago.
So did these big brands already build their own sort of dedicated private distribution channels? Do they have their own logistics businesses, or has it just become too expensive? Because you mentioned you mentioned Coca-Cola, and what was the other brand you mentioned?
Unilever.
I can never remember the name of this company for some reason. It's just a block in my head, although I know it well. But the point is, it doesn't make economic sense for them to come in and then rebuild a distribution channel in logistics, right? It must be way too expensive for them. So you're just trying to abstract not just the logistics away, but what other pieces of that business are you trying to abstract away so they can get products to people that want them, but they don't have to build that sort of super sophisticated logistics platform to be able to do that?
Well, we basically built the simple system called hub and spoke. It's basically a network of micro warehouses. It's like spider web. We put micro warehouses inside the villages. So these big brands don't have to build or don't have to acquire their own distribution channel for the villages. They can just use our micro hubs or the hub and spoke network we have built. But it's actually beyond that. At the end, we are a tech-enabled company. So we equip these hubs with the demand aggregation platform. It becomes very efficient for the brands to deliver to these hubs because we can fulfill their minimum order quantities, basically a technical term to making sure your first mile, mid-mile logistic is efficient and the cost is as low as possible. And number two, we also help them to forecast the demand of the villagers that living nearby and surrounding the hubs, so they can deliver at the exact amount at the exact time. And on top of it, we also help them mapping out what kind of outlets and what kind of the taste behavior of the people living surrounding the hubs, so they can set up the effective marketing campaign accordingly.
So talk to me about the tech stack, that you've built, because what it sounds like you're doing is doing a lot of data gathering, a lot of data organization, and a lot of data analysis. Like a lot of the stuff that the big companies may do for themselves, let's say in their home market, right, where they have access to a ton of data and a lot of historical data. I guess what you're suggesting is you're kind of coordinating not just the logistics around it, but saying we'll also understand the demand, as you said, aggregation around it. So that we'll give you, probably sell as a service, that data back to you, so you know exactly how much product, or close enough, to actually have in the warehouse, so that we can do this sort of Six Sigma level of like just-in-time delivery for the people that want your products. Is that true? And how sophisticated is this data stuff that you're doing?
I would say it's a combination of the offline effort and the technological features, because probably if you are in UK, the offline work is not there, so you can jump right away to the data analytics. You can just set up big warehouses in London and Manchester, and you cover at least 60% of the country. Or you are coming from US, you can just set up 2 mega warehouse in West Coast and East Coast, and it's probably covering at least 50-60% of the country, because highways are everywhere. But it's not the case in Indonesia. So even before you build the technological features, you gather all the data, you need to lay out the groundwork. You need to lay out the foundation. And that's where we built the hub and spoke, and then we hire the local people. Only afterwards, then you start gathering the data. And this is another challenge, because in UK, in US, you can speak English. Everyone can speak English. You can import someone from France, someone from Japan who can speak English and work for you. But in Indonesia, even you already live in Indonesia for 10 years and speak Bahasa, our language fluently, it's going to be tough, because they don't even speak Bahasa. They speak Javanese language, the provinces or the traditional language. And this language, just like Chinese, consists of multiple dialects. In Chinese, we have Hokkien and Kek. In Java, we have Ngapak, which is the roughest one, the most basic one, and then the Kromo Inggil, which is the softest one. So you have to communicate to them to start using your platform. And then only after that, you can gather the data and do all of the things we mentioned, the demand aggregation. So we have the sufficient volume to making sense for the brands and distributors deliver it directly. And then we have the data of their transaction activities towards the users or towards us. So we can forecast the future demand and we can manage our inventory. And then also we know where exactly the location and when the preferred time for them to get the goods, so that then we can mapping out and schedule the delivery accordingly.
It's so interesting. Can I bring this up as well, if you don't mind? I do an entire show on India and on how tech is changing the game in India, and I call it India Game Changer. And one of the conversations we often have is that, in one small village, if you go 100 miles one way or 150 miles the other way, that not only is the food different and the language different, but the culture is different too. India's a vast country. Indonesia, also a vast country. If you're suggesting that some of the languages are different in these smaller cities or smaller villages, is also the food and the culture different, which means that in every small place where the spokes are, that the products that they may want are different than even someone who's just like 100 miles away or 100 kilometers away? Is that a fair presumption?
So that is a story from this beverage company. It's a local company, but not as giant as the brands I mentioned earlier, which is Indofood. This is newer brand, smaller brand, but they are challenging the current products in the ready-to-drink tea category. So yeah, Tash in Indonesia, which is very popular, because lately there is a rising concern about healthy. People try to avoid sugars. Then they launched the less sugar and the no sugar variety of their products, right? And because they're already having a good relationship with us, they're spending a lot of promotional budget. They're spending a lot of discount to basically push out these products. But end up after 3 months, this less sugar and no sugar products that is priced 30% lower compared to the regular products, the sweet products, didn't pick up at all. Didn't pick up in the south part of Central Java. It picked up a little bit in the north part of the Central Java. When we look at it closer, the people in the rural areas love sweet things. They don't care about healthy stuff. They just love sweets, because for them, if it's not sweet, it's not tea, right? The north part of the Central Java took off a little bit, because there is a highway, the new highway that was just built 5 years ago, connecting the whole Java island, but it's located in the north part of Java. That's why it took part a little bit, because some city people are actually driving through those highway, or some drivers from Jakarta Logistic Company are bringing goods. They stop by and buy this less sugar things.
Is it Is it also possible that part of the impact of Dagangan is that, how can I say this? Like a smaller store that's already based in one of these villages or one of these smaller third tier or fourth tier cities now also has access to bigger markets, right? So it's great to bring Coca-Cola and Unilever and Indo Foods, right, into places where they might not have had access. But can you do the reverse as well and say, here's a small company with a great product that's been really good and successful in its little area, but that this hub and spoke thing now gives it access to take its product from this part of, let's say, Central Java to the northern part or the southern part, which they might not have been able to do before?
So there is a local family bakery. Its name is Auka, right? It produces a bread not only tastier, quote unquote sweeter because people are sweet, and cheaper compared to the previously the biggest brands is actually from Japan. They're offering bread like the cheap small sandwich, but it's not as sweet as the people are expected, and it's a bit more expensive. So it's very popular in the West Java, but then it struggles to reach the market in the Central Java and East Java. So they work with us. Previously, we were a bit pessimistic because we thought like no one knows about this bread. But within the first 6 months of onboarding these products, the revenue goes up for 10x, and and now I think 10% or more from our snack categories are coming from these products.
Is there is there a marketing and advertising angle for Dagangan as well? Let's just go back to this idea that you're gathering all this data, you understand what time and where and when people want these products. Is there also kind of like a marketing angle for you to say, like, we know that this product is in demand, but we can create more demand for it by doing some marketing based on the data that we have? Do you understand what I mean? So that the company itself doesn't have to do the marketing, but you can take that over for them as well and abstract that away, particularly for the smaller companies.
So recently, if you look at the Indonesian news, there were a lot of news
Yep.
about stunting, right? The government is trying very hard to fight stunting. Even the new president elect are trying to give free lunch for the students, for the kids through the schools, right?
So
And
stunting is what? Stunting is what?
stunting
Like,
is lacking of nutritious food.
got it. Okay.
Yeah,
Just want
yeah,
to make sure. Go ahead.
and that makes sense because they have a low income and they're struggling to get even the basic daily necessities because they have to travel to the universities. So there is a local milk company uh, trying to educate the people because beforehand people thought condensed milk is actually milk, but we know condensed milk is actually sugar. But they thought by drinking condensed milk they actually already drinking milk, and they are very reluctant to shift um, to the real milk, which is fresh milk, because they thought it's expensive. So there is a local milk company that offering the real milk, not the condensed milk, with the affordable price. They work with us by mapping out the outlets that is located in the schools or nearby the schools, which is the canteens, which is the stores that the students are typically buying things when they are on break or when they are finishing schools. So we are helping them to craft targeted marketing campaign and programs for these stores located in the canteen. And the program is actually very simple. You don't have to do anything. You don't even have to sell. You just need to display your products on your shelf, and you take picture with that shelf that already fill up with the milk product, and you post in your social media, and you will be incentivized with the vouchers. And by doing that, the students and the people around the school realize, oh, there is actually a milk, and it's actually can be bought with affordable price. And again, it's the
I
same
like.
story with the revenue.
So, and have you seen revenue boost kind of across the board? You must, even with the big brands, right? Like if they couldn't get themselves out into the smaller cities and the smaller villages, what kind of what kind of revenue increase are you seeing? Even for something like Coca-Cola, in a way, I feel really kind of reverse provincial on this. I've heard of Coca-Cola since I was like 3 years old, right? But it's likely that in a smaller village or in a smaller city, tier three or tier four in Indonesia, that they haven't even heard of it, right? Because how would they know? So are you increasing market for some of these big companies as well and increasing revenue for them?
Well, in Coca Cola, case, for example, previously they only can touch Jakarta, Surabaya, Bali, and all of those big cities in Indonesia, and they hardly can reach the rural areas. Not only because of the distribution infrastructure challenges, but of course because of the image of the rural people looking at the soda, which is that this is not healthy and stuff. But you know what?
But it's sweet though.
It's sweet, but then it's soda, so it's two different things from them. Sweet is
Fair
one,
enough.
but it's soda. So
Yep.
for them, is sweet is okay. It's not that hazardous, but then soda is very hazardous. But Coca-Cola, apparently in Indonesia, is not only having soda products; they have tea and mineral water products. So instead of being stubborn and pushing only the soda products, we are helping them to basically market and distribute their mineral water as well as the tea products.
How do you scale this? Because there's a real offline to online component here, it seems to me, right? Like you're not selling digital goods. You're kind of facilitating the sales of hard goods, right? Of solid goods, of real goods. How do you scale this up? Like, do you just have more and more micro warehouses? And how do you do like the delivery and stuff like that? Or somebody else do you use 3PLs? Or are you building out that whole logistics platform as well?
We don't own fleet, so we typically work with the local crowdsourcing to help us doing the smell delivery. But I think I would see the growth hacks in the scaling up is in the educating the people and acquiring users, because what I observe is if even if you are a PhD and you do a lot of research in one thing and you go to the villages and you say, look, I'm PhD, I'm expert on this, I suggest you to use this, they probably nod their head, but afterwards nothing happened, because either number one, they don't really understand what you say because you're speaking in English, or number two, you're speaking in Indonesia, but they don't really care. They're just being friendly to you. So what we observe is people only listen to the local influences. It's meaning the public figures, the religious leaders, the government officials, the one who already lived there for 20 years and do a lot of social works, right? So we try to leverage these people to educate the people about Dagangan. And then once they start being onboarded by our local offices as the follow-up of this education session by these local influencers, we already have the volume, we already have the traction. I think it's easier to deal with the last mile logistic. In terms of the tech, we already built this specific route planning. So we are the one who manage for these people and this route. You can use blind van, because the road is pretty wide and the road is pretty smooth, not bumpy. But then for the other sets of users, you have to take different routes. You need to use motorbike. So this guideline, this automated tracks generated on a daily basis, given to our crowdsourcing partners, local partners who is taking care of the last mile logistics. So they just need to open the app, follow it right away. In details, the instructions are there.
And what is it? This is a Dagangan sort of purpose-built delivery app that optimizes for the logistics. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, so we have three apps. The first one is the app that you can download in the Google Play Store, which is the app that is used by the user to do the transactions. And then this app's also used by the brands to do a lot of marketing campaign, including the one, the milk company that encourages the users to display the milk products on their shelf. That's one. Number two, we have a dashboard given to the brand. So like with Unilever, with Coca-Cola, with Ultra Milk, with Auka, we already work directly. So we provide them with the dashboard. They can see live the movement of their products, the buyer's profile, the outlets who are buying from them, what kind of products who are bought, the amount of products bought every single month. It's live. You can look at it and you can basically follow it up with the proper marketing campaign accordingly. And the third one is our, I would say, warehouse and logistic app. This is used by Dagangan and our partners. So it's basically the inventory management, the demand forecasting, and then also the routing and the last mile delivery management.
It sounds like the tech stuff you've built is really sophisticated. How big of a tech team do you have?
we used to have like up to 50, but now because things are already set up, we kind of streamline the tech to only basically maintain the features and also doing small upgrades over time.
And was all that done locally?
Locally, yes, not by Jakartan tech talent, by Yogyakarta and Central Java tech talent.
I love it. Is there a tech kind of city in Indonesia that's outside of Jakarta? You mentioned Yogyakarta, right? As well. Is there a sort of tech, what's the right word? Like tech hub, where a place like Bangalore or a place like Silicon Valley in Java where this stuff is happening, where everybody kind of goes to get programmers or engineers?
I'm not sure it's the same scale with Silicon Valley or Bangalore,
For sure.
but I think it's kind of
You know what I mean?
a public secret. If you cannot find your talent in Jakarta, then the second place you might want to visit is Jogja. It used to be Bali, but I think in the last 2 years, because of the winter, probably a lot of people in Bali are flying back to their home country or flying back to Jakarta. So the second place right now is Jogja.
Can I ask you this? Is the government, do you feel like the government in Indonesia is incentivized? You mentioned this new highway, right? And that people from Jakarta were like driving back and forth on this road. Is the government continually incentivized to continue to build better and better infrastructure, which would make like your job a lot easier, right? Because if the main roads are better, then the smaller roads can get better, and then the smaller kind of tier 3 and tier 4 city kind of link roads can get better as well. I see it happening in Thailand. The first time I drove from Bangkok to Chiang Mai in 1998, that's a real thing. The roads were terrible and there were no highways. But over the last like 20 something years, you see massive changes with massive highways and massive infrastructure getting built. Do you think the same things are incentivized in Indonesia as well? And you also mentioned, the Shinkansen in Japan. Do you think that's something that's going to happen in Indonesia as well?
I think so. We just had our Shinkansen, by the way. You should try from Jakarta to Bandung. Bandung is the capital city of West Java. The name of the Shinkansen is whoosh. Whoosh is basically slang Indonesian words showing that you are running very fast or you're moving very fast.
Yeah, it's a speed word.
Yeah. So previously from Jakarta to Bandung, it takes you 4 to 5 hours by car. Now it's 13 minutes by
train.
But by train. But that is only Jakarta and Bandung, which is like 2 cities out of like 30, 40, 50 cities in Java Island. They're thinking to extending it to Semarang and Surabaya. Let's see. If it's all connected, then it's going to be helpful. But this is only for people, right? I think it's still a long way to go if you're talking about the movement of the goods and products flow.
Yeah, but it feels like there's some excitement around this, and I think that's really cool. Like I think what Indonesia looks like today, and frankly all of Southeast Asia looks like today, and what it's going to look like in 15 or 20 years, is just going to almost be unrecognizable at some level, right? Because they're thinking about putting high-speed trains in Thailand. I'm sure they'll do it in Vietnam, which I know is off topic, but I'm sure that's going to happen as well. And it's kind of exciting because do you also feel like what Dagangan does can then be, what's the right word, like exported to other countries in the region that have similar issues, right? Where the main cities, like in Thailand, in Bangkok, access to everything. But in some of the smaller cities and even some of the smaller villages, same problem, very little access. The roads are maybe a little bit better, but do you feel like it's exportable? I know Indonesia is a massive opportunity in and of itself, but do you ever think about expanding outside, or at least partnering with people and telling them how to do this?
I think partnering would be better. I'm thinking of 3 things actually. Number 1 is timing, because if you look at Dagangan journey, we started at 2019, 5 years ago, and that's exactly the same year when the highway of Java that connect the corner of Javas are actually inaugurated. So I feel like without that, our job is going to be even more difficult. Now, I think we're looking for a local partners that know the timing when they should start similar businesses in other countries. Number 2 is, of course, the understanding of the local markets, local context. You will dealing with a lot of funny stuff or hanky-panky stuff, especially if you're a foreigner when you're going to the rural areas. But for me, it's kind of easy peasy, because actually I'm coming from a semi-military background. My friends are no police and armies, so it's not a big deal for me. So I'm looking for a partnership to be with someone like myself, but then in other countries, right? So I think timing, understanding what local markets, local partnerships, and number three would be the support from the brands. I would say what we are doing now, from economic perspective, from profitability perspective, doesn't make sense if we don't get incentives or support from the brand. We call it back margin on top of the front margin. Now, the problem is when we are expanding outside and the products that people are demanding is different with the products that we are selling here in Indonesia, then
For sure.
The brands are willing to support.
Got it. Can I ask you, what does Dagangan mean? Does it mean anything, or is it just an accumulation of sounds?
Dagangan is trading, buy and sell, but it's not formal Indonesian word. Formal Indonesian word is jual beli. Jual is sell, beli is buy. But dagangan is the Javanese slang words. So you remember Javanese have a lot of dialects. This is the roughest dialects, like the basic dialect you use with your friends.
I like it. And the last thing I'll ask you is, have you been funded?
Yeah. We raised pre-Series A 2020, and then Series A 2021, and pre-Series B 2022.
Good for you, man. Good for you. Okay. I love this story. You'll have to come back as you continue to grow this business. Ryan Manafe, a co-founder and the CEO of Dagangan. This was really interesting conversation, and I look forward to getting you back on the show soon. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me, Michael.